From Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, help me welcome Evan Poland.
John, thank you very much. For those of you who I have not met before, my background coming into this business is the background of a real non-selling professional. For some reason, my undergraduate degree is in psychology and sociology. My master's degree in social work really didn't prepare me for this. The way that I was introduced to Sandler, my sophomore, junior year of college, my parents bought the franchise. At the time, they were listening to the Breakfast Club tapes, 12, 16 tapes in a pack, and my brother and I would be sitting in the back of the car, driving with them, listening to the stuff we had no idea what we were listening to. In my career, before getting into business with my parents, used my background to develop a small counseling practice. I worked for a division of United Healthcare. Some of your former employers may have given me a call. Folks who had substance abuse issues in the workplace, stress issues in the workplace, those are the kinds of calls that I took. So that was my background before getting into this. In about 2 years, I really knew that corporate America was not for me. Things didn't move quickly enough. So the way I remember it, my parents begged me to come into the business. That's my recollection anyway. So we'll go with that. So I came into the business. Despite all of the warnings that I got, I really thought it was a training business where I'd get to sell once in a while. I'm a slow learner. It only took me 2 or 3 years to really figure out it was a selling business, and occasionally I got a chance to train. So that was some of my background coming into this. I'm also, and talking with Marku before, I believe that I am the only SC in the entire network with a disc profile. So I do connect pretty well with the non-selling professionals. So that's kind of how I got into the business. I started in the business 2001. Next year will be my 14th year in business with my father and my mother. Best decision I ever made. So that's kind of how I got here. My purpose. A couple of things I want everybody to walk away with about 57 minutes from now. What I like about a lot of the school programs, the programs I tend to like, one, it's great when you get ideas that you can bring back to your President's Club, but I really enjoy the programs where I can take the ideas, go back and start making money with it right away. So my goal for this program is to give you 1 or 2 ideas that you can take back and use in your franchises as soon as you get back. The other thing that might happen, and I know is perfectly okay, as we go through and talk about the professional services, non-selling professionals, you may decide that it's a market that you don't want to get into. Better to figure that out up front rather than spending a couple of months or a couple of quarters really spending a lot of time and effort there before realizing it's not really for you. So we'll kind of go through how to get in front of them, how to use an EB, so that you can put salespeople and non-selling professionals in the same room. And as we go through, you'll determine whether or not this is something that makes sense for you in your franchise. So that's what I want to do. We'll go through exactly what a non-selling professional is to us. We'll talk a little bit about how do we get them in the room. Talk about what do we do in the briefing when you've got salespeople sitting next to attorneys, sitting next to accountants. And then how to close them at the end of the briefing. And as we go through, if anybody has any pressing questions, just let me know. Otherwise, we will have time for some questions at the end. So first, what's a non-selling professional to us? Our definition of a non-selling professional is someone who never in their worst nightmares thought that they'd ever have to go out and produce business. Our non-selling professionals, for the most part, attorneys, accountants, architects, engineers, high-level consultants. And when I say high-level consultants, there was a firm I worked with a number of years ago. It was a consulting firm, PhDs. Their offices were in Philadelphia and in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so that all of their folks would be PhDs from Penn or Harvard. When I went in for a first meeting and sat down, asked them to tell me in about 15, 20 seconds what it was that they did, 15 minutes later, I still had no idea what it was that they did. So those are the kinds of folks we're talking about when we're talking about non-selling professionals. Most of these folks are spending 90 to 95% of their time servicing their clients. So real world, they only have maybe 2 to 5 hours a week to sell. Most of them, when they went into their chosen profession, had no idea that they'd have to be involved in business development at all, something that was sprung on them later in their career. Or when the economy went bad, they were downsized, and now either I open my own shop with my own shingle, or I'm in really big trouble. So those are the kinds of folks that we identify as non-selling professionals. So first, we need to get them in the room. So how do we get the non-selling professionals in the room? First thing we do is we have an email blast. For us, we have 2 separate databases. We have one database for salespeople, sales organizations. They get 1 invitation. We have a separate database for our non-selling professionals, our attorneys, our accountants, our architects, our engineers. We send out 2 different invitations, and I'll get to the invitations in a minute. We send them into the same exact workshop. They just have no idea that they're going into a workshop with other people who do things far outside of what they do. So email blast is one way that we do it. At this point, we've got a couple thousand people on the list. Networking is another way that we fill up our executive briefings. And by the way, just show of hands, how many of you right now are currently doing executive briefings? Okay, good. A majority of the room. I will tell you, we did them for a while. For some reason, I don't know that we could ever put our finger on it. We got away from it for several years. The last 3 or 4 years, we have done 10 to 12 briefings a year and are averaging at least a couple of clients out of each briefing. So that's what we're looking for, and we're doing them because we can track revenue directly back to the briefing. So with the networking, between Chuck and myself, we probably get to about 4 networking events a week. And a lot of the way that we're able to fill the briefing is meeting folks at the event, getting a little bit of pain. Our marketing associate sends out an invitation to the workshop. That's how we get a lot of folks into the briefing. Referrals from clients is another way that we get a lot of folks into the briefing. Later in the talk, we'll also talk a little bit about how to use the book that we wrote. One of the things that we will do is use our clients to help us get in front of other non-selling professionals. How many of you work with small business owners? Show of hands. Do most of your small business owners use an attorney from time to time? Do most of your small business owners use an accountant from time to time? How many of your clients have you asked for referrals specifically to the folks that they use to get into their networks? One of the biggest mistakes that we've seen franchisees who are trying to break into this market do is they try to do it through cold call blitzes, try to reach out to people they don't know who have never heard of them. I've got to tell you, in our market, we still have a hard time doing that, even though we've been working with non-selling professionals for 20 years. When we get our clients to make introductions for us, it makes our jobs way easier. We don't get the questions of, geez, have you ever worked with us before? You know, we're a little bit different. When we get those referrals and introductions, those questions don't come up as much. And then LinkedIn. We will have 2 different invitations. So the sales-related groups, we will post the sales invitation. The marketing for law firms, accounting firms, engineering firms, those groups, we will send the non-selling professional version of the invitation. So the invitation to get folks into the workshops. What we do, again, is just create 2 separate invitations. With the invitations, and I'll show you one of the templates. With the invitations, the template is exactly the same. The only thing that we change are 2 or 3 of the pain points that are over on the right-hand side. And the quote from the client. For the regular briefing, again, we have companies. For the non-selling professionals, we try to get a quote from law firm, accounting firm, engineering firm, put that quote in there. Otherwise, it is the same exact invitation, the same exact template, no additional work on our end at all. The other thing that we do, and again, this is a non-selling professional invitation, again, looks exactly the same, just a couple of differences with the pain points. How many of you, before your executive briefings, send out a survey maybe a week or so before to try to identify pain? So we are big believers in that. It gives us a very good idea of exactly what the challenges of the folks are going to be before they ever walk into the briefing. So again, all we do is create 2 separate confirmation forms. One confirmation form has the pains for the sales professionals, for the business owners. We pull the pains right off of those 4 S sheets that I think maybe Bill McCrary introduced to the network years and years ago. And then we just switch out some of the pain points for the non-selling professionals, and again, send them their own survey so we can find out what their pains are. Between the invitation that speaks to their pains, the survey that again speaks to their pains, they get a really good idea that we know what we're talking about and we understand what their issues, what their challenges are before they ever walk into the briefing. The other thing we do, and we've been pretty good in terms of getting 80-90% attendance to our briefings, we send out those surveys a week before the briefing, and 1 to 2 business days before the briefing, we follow up with a call to reconfirm that they're going to be coming to the briefing. Typically with those confirmation calls, we're letting them know that there's a waiting list, even if there's only 3 people signed up for the briefing. We'll ask them how they wanted their steak cooked for breakfast. It's really important to do that follow-up before we're doing follow-up. That way we'd only get 50 to 75% of the people actually show up for the briefing. Our briefings are about 2 hours in length. We leave some extra time at the end because we prefer to end early rather than keep them there late. Try to encourage some networking amongst the folks at the beginning of the briefing. Again, at that point, we don't get any questions from the non-selling professionals about why it's not other attorneys, accountants that are there in the briefing. Strongly encourage them that it may actually be a good opportunity to make some new contacts. So the briefing itself. What I'm going to do is, most of you have run executive briefings before, so I'm not going to run a mock briefing because you've all done them before. I'll just take you through some of the things that we do that might be just a little bit different in the briefing to maybe give you a couple of ideas if you need to change the briefing up, might help. One of the things that we do is case studies. Before we ever get into the briefing, before we even have them go through introductions of themselves, have them do their own 30-second commercials, we'll give them 1 or 2 case studies. We will pull 1 or 2 case studies for non-selling professionals, 1 or 2 case studies from regular sales organizations so that people see that we work with both. Again, we'll give them an idea of how long we've worked with the firm, how much money they invested, and a good idea on the return on investment, and let them know what kind of services that we provided for those particular clients. So I've got a case study for a staffing company that we worked with, case study for a law firm that we've worked with. The other thing that we will do to show that Sandler training works for just about anyone, and I didn't have all of the sign-offs, so I couldn't show the sheet here, but we list about 20 or 30 companies on one slide that we've worked with. We make sure to hit lots of different industries on those slides so that folks can see that we've worked with lots and lots of different types of organizations, and regardless of who they are, yes, we've worked with someone just like them. What we want to do in the briefings is get engagement as quickly as possible. So we like to start with an icebreaker exercise. We're not really big on reinventing the wheel. So most of you have probably seen this exercise before. This is the numbers exercise that I think is in front of maybe why have a system in the front of that chapter. We find this to be a great exercise. One, people have no idea what we're doing when we're doing it. We'll make a joke that because there's people from so many different companies, so many different organizations, we don't know whether to use the basic deck or the advanced deck, and we use this test to figure out what level they're at before we get started. So we'll have them go through this, and then have them go through the next step of the exercise. The accountants, the engineers, they absolutely love this. Most of them walk in with the preconception that people are born with natural sales attributes. And when we talk about the difference between doing the exercise the first time or the second time, the fact that they see that there's a process, there's a system. At the beginning of the briefing, we'll share with them that we're going to give them a system for how to get in front of opportunities, because with the non-selling professionals, that is their biggest pain. Their belief system is that their close rate is somewhere north of 150%. It's just getting in front of the opportunity, but once somebody gets in front of them, they'll see how great they are. So we will talk about a system and a process for how to do that, and a system and a process for what to do once they get in front of someone. It makes them more comfortable knowing that there is a system in place, there's a process in place. It's not something that you're born with. We'll joke with the salespeople that we know that they have two systems that they use. One is typically winging it, the other is flying by the seat of their pants. So we may want to introduce a third system to them. And it gets everybody on board with what it is that we want to accomplish throughout the course of the day. We will then, and we may do this in a slightly different order than what some of you are doing, because we find that with the non-selling professionals, their biggest pain is prospecting, getting in front of opportunities. By the way, my guess is most of the salespeople that you're in front of, that's their same pain. Douglas, you have a question?
I can't stand the suspense. What is that exercise you're going to show me?
Oh, I'm sorry, I just assumed that everybody was familiar with it. So the exercise is numbers 1 through 100 scattered randomly throughout the page. You tell people that they have a minute to circle as many numbers as they can in order, starting with the number 1. We tell them that salespeople cheat. They can't circle the number 30, just assuming that they're going to get there and game the system. Then we'll joke that attorneys are even worse than salespeople, and everybody in the room will laugh. We have them go through the exercise. As they're going through, I'll set expectations like, geez, average person gets 45 or 50. You've got 30 seconds left, and they're scrambling around, and most of them get like 20, 22. I'll tell them how disappointed I am that we're going to have to do the exercise again before we continue, because they're just not at the level they need to be for us to even continue the workshop. So I will then have them turn over the page. You can see up on the screen on the top line in the middle between the numbers 61 and 14, have them draw a vertical line down the page. Along the left-hand side, the numbers 41 and 63, have them draw a horizontal line across the page. It breaks it into 4 quadrants. The number 1's in the top right-hand quadrant, number 1's in the top left-hand quadrant, number 2's in the top right-hand quadrant, number 3's in the bottom left, number 4's in the bottom right, then number 5 is in the top left-hand corner. I say, now that you've got that information, I'm going to give you another minute to see how you do. They do 2 or 3 times better, and I'll ask them what the difference between the first time and the second time is, and they'll say things like, well, I had smaller areas to look in. I knew where to go to look. I had a process. I had a system. And then that's when we'll go into, geez, how many of you have a process and a system for prospecting for what you do once you get in front of your prospects, and that's what we'll use to get into the workshop. The next thing that we'll do before we get into the Wimp Junction talk is talk a little bit about mindset. What we'll do is give the Henry Ford quote, if one man thinks he can do a thing and another man thinks he cannot, they are both right. We will then ask them why we gave that quote, what they think it means. Someone in the room will get that it's your mindset, and if you go in and you think you can do something, you can get it done. And if you go in with a defeatist mindset, you're never going to accomplish it. We'll tell them that that applies to sales and business development, and that if they come in thinking that they can't do it, then they'll have a self-fulfilling prophecy and they won't be able to do it. But if they think that they can do it, that they may be able to have a chance to be successful, that they will be successful with doing this. We also ask them how long their issues have been going on. And if they've been going on for a long time, what are the expectations? What are the chances that in 1 2-hour session, they're going to go away forever? They all agree that that's probably not going to happen. We want to let them know that this isn't the system. They're not going to get everything in 2 hours. We'll also ask for a show of hands of how many have been to a 1 or 2 day workshop. Ask them how much information they retain after that workshop. They get that it's only 5 or 6%. So we'll share with them that we believe in ongoing reinforcement training. What we're looking to do is build skills, not have you run over hot coals at the end of this workshop. So that's the mindset that we try to give them going into this. We'll also share with them that there's only one time that the training doesn't work, and that's if they're not using it. that will share with them that there are some people who sit in class as an intellectual exercise, that we're better with volunteers than prisoners. If somebody's being forced to go, they're not going to get anything out of it. So that, they've got to have the right mindset if they want to get results. Next, what we'll do is we will have everybody go around the room and give a brief 15 to 20 second introduction. One is worse than the next when they do it. As they do the introductions, we will ask them what brought them to the workshop. What was it that what they were hoping to get out of the 2 hours? And basically what we're doing is building an agenda with pain. And the non-selling professionals, their pains are really not much different than the business owners and the salespeople. So we've got some of them up here, not leveraging contacts, not leveraging their current relationships, trouble taking business away from the competition, inconsistent results, inconsistent process, too much free consulting, no growth, don't know what to do about it. And we'll go through, and the non-selling professionals will quickly see that they've got the same exact pains that the salespeople do. The business owners will talk about the fact that they're frustrated because they're doing 70% of the sales of the company and they've got 10, 12 other salespeople. The managing partners in firms will complain that only 1 or 2 of the partners are bringing in business and they're feeding 20, 30, 40 other professionals. So very quickly, they all see that they've got the same pains, they've got the same problems. The other thing that we will do with our pain surveys is we'll put it on the back of the yes-no sheet so that they can check them off, and we will ask them how much they think that issue has cost them over the last year. And we will try to get everybody in the room to quantify what their pain is costing them in dollars and cents. And what we typically find is it ends up being hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, to again really get them in some pain before we even get to the rest of the workshop. And we're doing all of this in the first 15, 20 minutes.
Do they say out loud how much it's costing them, or they just keep it to themselves and write it down?
What we will typically do is ask for a show of hands with that issue. How many is it costing thousands? How many is it costing tens of thousands? How many is it costing hundreds of thousands? And they see that other people in the room are raising their hand, so we'll do it by show of hand rather than putting an individual on the spot. And then when we're done going through all of the pains, we'll then ask them to add it up and say, okay, well, how many of you are your pains costing over 6 figures? Is it costing anybody 7 figures or more? So we'll do it in a group setting so that they can see that, one, they're not the only one, and we're not putting anybody on the spot. So any other questions up to this point? Once we go through the pain, what we want to do is put them on the spot a little bit. And we'll say, okay, the first thing that we're going to talk about is getting in front of opportunities, because if you're not in front of opportunities, the rest of the sales process doesn't really matter. What do you think happens when we ask them to write down their prospecting plan? We'll give them 5 minutes at their spot to write down their own prospecting plan. And quite frankly, some of them are laughing to themselves as they're doing it. So when we ask, again, we'll ask the group for what they came up with. Here's what we get 99 out of 100 times. We get a list of prospecting activities. Well, I go to networking events. I get referrals. And when they say they get referrals, that never means that they've asked for referrals. People just occasionally give them a call. So they will give you a list of 5, 6, 7 different prospecting activities, and they think that's what a plan is. And we'll ask them, geez, how predictable is that? How trackable is that? How can you measure what you're going to do in the next year? And they all throw up their hands and they say, we give it a guess, we're not quite sure. So we'll then ask them if it makes sense for us to go through the steps of a prospecting plan. If we don't get immediate yes, let's see it. We'll say, okay, well, it doesn't seem that you're really interested in that. Let's just move on. And then, no, we need to see it. We want to see it. So we'll go through the steps of a prospecting plan. For us, what we're going through, and we spend a lot of time on prospecting, especially with the non-selling professionals, because some of those folks have never actually been on a sales opportunity before. They're service partners who are working on the work, and they know that they're going to be expected to go out and get in front of folks, but they have not yet been on their own appointment. Others think that their closing percentage is really high, and it actually typically is very high because the only people they're seeing are people who are calling with a desperate need or people who have been really strongly referred. So they've never actually proactively gone out after a really big opportunity with somebody who doesn't know them or hasn't heard of them. So they really aren't in those positions yet, so they don't know what kind of pain they have yet when it gets to not doing too much free consulting, when it gets to shortening the selling cycle. So we start with the prospecting plan. And we share with them, and this is what we go through that they should have. We suggest that they need to have goals, dollars and cents, what it is they want to do, targets, and we'll give them enough to let them know that we know that what we're talking about without giving everything away. So we'll quickly ask them if they have targets in terms of which vertical markets they want to get in. We'll briefly introduce the concept of rabbit, steer, and elephant.